Hello, 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 and welcome once again to another Lease Defend podcast. I am your host, Art Veal. I'm happy to be with you today. I'm feeling great. Today is Thursday, which means there's only one more day to the weekend, and I am looking forward to taking some time. So I hope your week is going well. Let's get started with today's podcast. In today's podcast, I'll be discussing one of the ways that the best way, in my opinion, to show your rental property. Showings have always been a kind of a headache for me because you deal with going to the property, people not showing up when they say they're going to show up, or calling saying, "Hey, I'm running late," or I've tried a lot of different ways to show my properties. I've tried setting a open house kind of window, and that worked okay. But the only problem was there would always be someone who would come at the very end, or they would come late and ask me to come back and show them the place, or especially when I'm pulling off after showing the place, they would come back and say, "Hey, I just got here. Can I see it?" Then at the same time, another problem with open house showings is that sometimes nobody shows up because let's say you set up appointments for Wednesday and you set them up on Monday and Tuesday, and let's say you had 10 people. 8 of those 10 people might have found another place by Wednesday. 2 of those 10 people might just not make it because they had other stuff come up. And so you just end up wasting a lot of time doing open house showings, in my opinion, at least my experience. And so I've always looked for a couple of years, I spent some time looking at the best way to show my properties. And one-on-one appointments I can't stand because those are a complete waste of time. You can set 20 one-on-one appointments. Of those 20, probably less than half will even show up. So you're wasting your time. And I think the way that I show properties now has some added benefits that I'm going to discuss. So to give you the without further ado, the way that I show properties is absentee showings. Absentee showings, in my opinion, are the absolute best way to show your property because there are a lot of benefits. An absentee showing is essentially when you don't go to the property on your own. You put the property on a lockbox, or same way realtors do. They put their properties on a lockbox, and then you give the person that wants to see the property the lockbox code. And then when you give them that code, they can go. They tell you what day they're going to go, and I'll show you how I kind of set that up. But they tell you which day they're going to go, and then you give them a code good for that day, and they can go on that day. If they make it, that's great. If they make it late, it really didn't bother you because they still got in, and they just call you when they're done. But I just think it works a lot better. And I know there are a lot of questions that come with this because people are concerned about what about them stealing or breaking into the house after after they've left, or what about them taking the key and making copies of it and all kinds of things. I'm going to address all of that in this podcast. So let me start with some of the benefits. The first benefit of absentee showing is that it is a form of tenant screening. If you set it up right, then this is a way to screen tenants. See, I look at screening tenants as more than just verifying that they can pay the income, pay the rent, more than just verifying if they're going to, make payments in a timely manner. I actually want people that psychologically do what they say they're going to do. They can follow through with directions. They can follow through with promises made, because people that follow through with directions and can pay attention to detail and do what they say they're going to do, those people usually stay at jobs longer. Those people usually stay employed or get higher paying jobs. Those people usually maintain and respect your property and their own stuff better. And these are all the qualities that you want in a good tenant. So if you give them instructions to go over to the property on their own, and they don't show up, they don't go to the property, then you kind of knew what you were getting to begin with. If they show up, but they call you and they're 3 days late, and they say, "Hey, I was supposed to go over there Monday, I didn't get over there till today," it shows you what kind of person they are. If they get over there and they say, "Hey, I got in and you gave me the instructions, but I can't get in this house," I'll help them on the phone, but it kind of gives me an idea of, is this person going to be bothersome. I've had people that I've sent to a house, and it doesn't happen often, but they've contacted me 12 times while they were looking at the house, and they've contacted me just to say, hey, what about this and what about that? And it kind of gives me an idea. Are they going to be, uh, are they going to always kind of want to bother me with a lot of stuff with the property? So you get a lot of feedback on how the person is by having them go to the property on their own. Another benefit is that it saves you time. How much time do you spend driving over to a property and showing the property, or them not showing up at all, or you going in and making sure everything is clean and nice, and then they don't show up, or they show up late, or they show up and walk around for 2 seconds, or they all kinds of excuses, and it just wastes your time. And that's when you have one property and you're showing it to 4 or 5 people. Let's count if you got 10 or 15 properties, or you're showing a lot of properties. Now, maybe it's different if you're in an apartment complex and you're showing you got 20 units and they're all in the same building. You can just basically sit over there all day and show people specific units. But if you're dealing with single family properties, if you're dealing with a 2 flat or something small where you've got multiple properties spread out across the city or across your area, it can be kind of time consuming to go show these properties. But if you set up your absentee showings the right way, then it's very easy. You can do it with no problem, because they're going to go over there at their leisure to look at the property. Another benefit, then this is one of the biggest benefits that I see, is that when you do absentee showings, it creates scarcity. A lot of times what I do is so in my process, and I talk about this in one of the other podcasts, I believe it's the one on how I screen tenants, the best tenant screening process. In my process, I have people fill out an application before they go see the house. And I know that sounds a little bit weird to most people, but my logic with it is I don't want to waste time showing you the house if I find out you can't even afford it, or if I find out your income is nowhere near what I'm going to accept. So I make them do an application first. And I suggest all landlords make them do an application first. It doesn't have to be a paid background check. In fact, I don't suggest a paid background check up front, but it should be some kind of preliminary application that they have to fill out. And the reason is twofold. One, it makes sure you're only sending people that qualify for the property. So if they like it, then you already know at the beginning that they pretty much qualify. The other benefit of screening them first is that if anything were to happen to the property, then you got a list of people who've gone to the property. And for them, they know it before I tell them that I'm going to let them go see the house themselves. They filled out this application. So they know they usually haven't lied about who they are to get into the house, because they don't know that I'm going to do an absentee showing. So they tell me the truth about who they are, and then when I tell them it's a lockbox code on the house, they say okay, and they go to the house and they lock it up, and then I tell them to call me immediately after they've seen the property. I do that for 2 reasons. One, because I want to make sure they've seen it and they've locked the house back up and I know that they've been over there. And 2, I like to get their feedback. What did they like? What did they think? Was there something wrong with the house? Let's say the basement flooded and I didn't know it. They can tell me, your basement's flooded, and I can say, oh, okay, and I can send somebody over there. So they're almost like doing, a check on the property, and it creates scarcity because I can send several people over there on the same day. I can send 10 families to a property on the same day. And when people see other people coming to look at the property that they're looking at, it immediately creates scarcity, and they think to themselves, not, do I want this place? They think to themselves, okay, is this place going to work for me? Because I need to make a decision before these people make a decision. And that's a very big difference. Sometimes there are people that are kind of straddling the fence with making the decision on whether or not they should take a place. And the scarcity of seeing other people coming to look at it and other families checking the house out will push them over the fence to say, yeah, let me go ahead and make a move on this place because it works for me. So that's a very real and a very big benefit to absentee showings. Again, another benefit is it allows you to check on the property using other people. I can't tell you how many times I've sent somebody to the property to see it, and they'll tell me something like, I can even ask them. I can say, well, did the grass seem okay? Was the grass cut? And they can say, no, the grass wasn't cut. And I can find out from my lawn people if they've taken care of it, or find out if they're lying that they've taken care of it. I can find out, if the basement was flooded. I can find out if the door was left open. Now that's never happened, but I can find out if the door is left open or anything weird like that. Also, it reduces my time of having to go over to the property. I probably visit the property once or twice a week, if that, depending on how many showings I have, because I change the lockbox code every other day. And I only have to do it after I've set up a bunch of people to go see the property. But I can change the lockbox code, and I can also just check on it to make sure nothing's out of place or anything like that. So that's always a good thing. It's an extra set of eyes to look at the property. Um, Another benefit is that it makes the renter comfortable. The person that's looking at the property feels a lot more comfortable going to see the property without, that awkwardness of, making a decision in front of your face to say, yes, we want it, or no, we don't. A lot of people psychologically, they don't like to tell people no. So instead, if they don't like the place, instead of telling you no, they'll say, let me think about it, or let me, this, that, and the other. And if you do an absentee showing where they get to go and look at it, some people I've seen go in and measure the bedrooms. Some people I've seen go in and, take their kids and say, hey, does this room work for you? All that kind of stuff. They can do all of that stuff with no pressure from you. And then they can call you and say, hey, we've seen it, or whatever. Now, some people are worried about, what about if they move into the house? What if they, get the key and go in and move into the house? I don't think that's really a big issue unless you're dealing with a really bad area. I've dealt with some rough areas. I'm in Chicago, and I've dealt with some rough areas in my market and still had no problem doing absentee showings. Now, my properties aren't in the worst areas. They aren't in, heavily crime-ridden areas, but they're in areas where, theft could be a problem and that kind of thing. And I've never had an issue with absentee showings because the people that come to see the property are people that legitimately want to get into the property. What I don't suggest, and I did have this problem before, is let's say you're over there working on a house and someone wants to come in and see the house, and the house is vacant, and they, you let them in right from the street and say, hey, come and look at the house. The reason I don't suggest that is because I've had in Chicago, there was a really big epidemic of scrap metal guys going into vacant properties or properties that are being renovated and stealing all the metal out of the house. I had a property that we were renovating, and a guy pulled up and said, hey, I'm interested in this house. Is it for rent? And I, like a fool, said, yeah, it's for rent. And he said, oh, can I take a look at it? He went through the house, looked at it. He saw that there was a new furnace in the house. He saw that there was plumbing in the house, all these things, and saw that the house was empty. And the next day I went over there, and my furnace was gone. Some of the copper piping was gone. And it was just a lesson in don't show people off the street. And I didn't have the guy's name. I didn't know anything about him, and that just happened, so I don't suggest letting people in without collecting some information from them. And it gives you, like I said, it gives you another benefit is it gives you a list of people to follow up with if they don't like this house. You can say, hey, you didn't like this place. I've got your name. I've got your email. Let me, send you something else I have, and you can go look at that. With absentee showings, some families like to get, 5 or 6 properties together and go on a Saturday when they're not working and go look at all the properties at once. You can do that very easily with absentee showings. You can give them all the lockbox codes to several of the houses or the properties they're interested in, and they can do the trip and go from each house to each house and let you know which one they like and which one they don't like. And the final benefit to this absentee showings is that you can set your appointments from anywhere. I can't tell you how many times I've been on vacation or been away from home, and someone will call and I get their application. It looks good, and I'll say, okay, well, they'll say, well, I'm a truck driver, or I'm a this, and I'm going to only have this day available to see the property. Now, if you had to show it to them, you could either find somebody to show it to them on your behalf, which probably won't sell it as well as you will, or you could do the absentee showing and get them in on the day that they want to get in, and they could call you back and you could handle the whole thing by phone, and they still got in to see the property on the day that works for them. So overall, absentee showings are beneficial to both of you, the tenant and the owner, for convenience. It's a lot of benefits to you and convenience and saving time. You can put your time and effort into doing something else, buying more property or whatever you need to. But at the same time, it's convenient for them because they're not stuck to a schedule where they have to be there at a set time, and life gets in the way and they can't make it at that exact moment, but they can make it there that day. And so it solves a lot of issues. So that's my take on absentee showing. I think it's a great way to show your properties. If you have questions or comments about it, or you feel that it doesn't make sense, or maybe you thought of something that I didn't think of, then I'd love to hear your feedback. I'd love to get your comments, and I'll respond in the comments section below. Until next time, this has been Art Veal with the Lease Defend podcast. I wish you the best and have a great day. Talk to you later.